On April 2nd, Trump unleashed the largest tariff blitz in U.S. history, promising to dominate China. But just 3 weeks later, Ford halted production, Boeing warned of military risks, and America's supply chain began to unravel, all without a single shot being fired. Why? Because China didn't retaliate with more threats. Instead, Beijing simply cut off the rare earth minerals that power everything from iPhones to F-35 jets. By April 2, 2025, Trump had declared economic war with sweeping tariffs, vowing to bring Beijing to its knees. But by June, he was on Truth Social praising a very good conversation with President Xi and begging for the restart of mineral exports. America couldn't function without those minerals. What changed? Rare earths. After China halted exports of 6 heavy rare earth elements on April 4th, the materials that power U.S. jets, electric vehicles, EVs, and missile systems vanished from the market. By mid-May, Ford had temporarily shut down production, and GM and Stellantis reported delays across their EV divisions. According to Bloomberg, U.S. industrial production had dropped 1.4% in May, its steepest fall since the 2020 pandemic recovery, while the producer price index surged 3.1% year-over-year, driven largely by raw material shortages. Behind the scenes, National Economic Council Director Kevin Haseed admitted, "We want the rare earths to flow just as they did before April, but there's no signed deal, just a phone call and a photo op." If Trump promised to win, why was he now pleading to get back what he had deliberately pushed away? China supplies over 90% of the world's rare earth elements, and after April's export suspension, the U.S. was left scrambling to fill the gap with no substitutes. These minerals aren't optional, they're essential. Neodymium iron boron magnets, used in jet engines, missile guidance systems, electric vehicle motors, and smartphones, rely almost exclusively on Chinese supply. The Wall Street Journal reported that Boeing faced component delays affecting at least 2 weapons platforms by late May, while the Pentagon quietly flagged operational risks tied to rare earth availability. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, now in London for damage control talks, confirmed on Fox Business that America had no industrial alternative at scale. Meanwhile, Chinese Vice Premier Haley Feng issued just 3 rare earth licenses to U.S. firms last week, only after direct requests from General Motors, Ford, and Lockheed Martin. That's not supply chain resilience. It's survival by negotiation. Now, every shipment depends on a licensing process governed not by market forces but by Beijing's evolving definition of national security. Trump repeated the word deal 4 times in one televised clip, but China never confirmed one existed. For China, silence is leverage. In response to U.S. tariffs and new export controls targeting Huawei's AI chips, China didn't retaliate with more tariffs. They suspended rare earth exports and introduced a licensing regime requiring national security justification for every shipment. Since April 4th, only 5 export licenses have been granted globally, with 3 going to U.S. defense-linked firms. Under diplomatic pressure, the resulting bottlenecks caused a 27% increase in rare earth magnet prices in May alone, according to Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. This strategy wasn't about bluster, it was about bottlenecks. China didn't need sanctions or military threats. They simply paused what the U.S. needed most and let the pressure build. As former U.S. Ambassador to China Gary Locke bluntly put it, "We handed Beijing leverage, and now they're using it with quiet precision." So what happens if China tightens that grip again next quarter? Trump launched tariffs before confirming if the U.S. had enough critical supplies to survive the fallout, and it didn't. The U.S. imports 78% of its neodymium and 98% of its dysprosium from China, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. There's no domestic refining capacity for heavy rare earths at commercial scale. A Pentagon memo obtained by Bloomberg in early June warned that the U.S. defense industrial base remained acutely vulnerable to extended rare earth disruptions. Meanwhile, manufacturers scrambled. Tesla rerouted some supply to Malaysia, but at a 32% premium, while Ford spent $12 million air shipping rare earths from Australia via emergency channels, a cost passed directly to consumers. Economists at HSBC now estimate the rare earth shortfall alone could shave 0.6% off U.S. GDP by Q3 if no deal is finalized. The Wall Street Journal notes that 64% of U.S. small manufacturers reported raw material shortages in May. But instead of laying the groundwork for alternatives, the administration relied on theatrics, announcing tariffs, then calling Xi days later to walk them back. What remains isn't strategy, it's a scramble to patch the very hole the policy created. Trump labeled the May 11th Geneva truce a total reset, boasting of a 90-day tariff pause and momentum toward a broader deal. But within 48 hours, his own Commerce Department undermined the agreement by warning global firms that Huawei's Ascent AI chips could violate U.S. export rules. China's Ministry of Commerce dismissed the reset as unilateral posturing, calling the new guidance a breach of trust and accusing the U.S. of escalating through regulation. According to Bloomberg, rare earth prices surged 19% over the following week, and the Hang Seng Tech Index fell 5.4% amid fears of a renewed decoupling. Vice Premier Haley Feng clarified that China would continue processing export licenses on a security-conditional basis, signaling compliance would now be filtered case by case. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer accused Beijing of managing scarcity for leverage. With no enforcement language ratified, what began as a handshake reset is now a standoff, sealed by mutual suspicion and priced into global supply chains by the hour. Okay, so let's do a quick check-in. Who's actually winning here, and who's paying the price? China's trade surplus with the United States hit $43.1 billion in May 2025, up from $41.1 billion the previous month, even with the ongoing mineral squeeze in stalled tech exchanges. Ford revised its second quarter earnings forecast down 11.2% after admitting EV assembly delays tied to rare earth magnet shortages. Boeing's June 5th SEC filing warned of classified program interruptions stemming from supply constraints in neodymium-based alloys. The ISM manufacturing PMI dropped to 47.2, marking the third consecutive month in contraction, and HSBC projected that rare earth disruptions could trim 0.6% off U.S. GDP if licensing delays persist past July. NFIB survey data showed 64% of small manufacturers reported critical material shortages, with 42% expecting those constraints to worsen. Meanwhile, the Chinese government approved just 3 new rare earth licenses, each directly tied to major U.S. automaker lobbying efforts. So if the scoreboard is trade surpluses versus factory shutdowns, the war isn't over, but the battleground has quietly shifted to the licensing desks in Beijing. On May 28th, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced sweeping visa restrictions on Chinese students, calling them security liabilities and vowing to tighten screening for all STEM-related academic visas. China's foreign ministry shot back, accusing the U.S. of academic isolationism and warning it would respond with reciprocal measures that would hit American universities. According to ICF Monitor, Chinese student visa approvals fell 18.6% year-over-year in April, and at least 14 visiting scholars from China were denied renewals in May at top U.S. research institutions. Meanwhile, the Commerce Department expanded its Huawei-related enforcement, saying even third-party firms using components derived from U.S. tech could face penalties. That move prompted 4 European firms to suspend joint AI projects with Chinese partners, according to Reuters. The Wall Street Journal reported that Stanford's Quantum Research Center paused 2 collaborative grants due to licensing uncertainty. The damage isn't really visible in headlines, but it's structural. The slow dismantling of decades of educational and technological exchange, and once it's gone, there's no fast rebuild. The Geneva tariff suspension ends August 9th, and with no signed deal, reversion is looming. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent admitted on CNBC that enforcement clauses are still unresolved, while Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick confirmed only 3 rare earth export licenses had been granted through June 7th, narrowly scoped to automaker suppliers. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce projects that reinstating the 145% tariffs could cost American importers $18.2 billion in the fourth quarter alone. The American Automotive Policy Council warned of potential 6 to 9-week production delays across Ford, GM, and Stellantis if magnet supply tightens again. China's Vice Premier Haley Feng hasn't committed to a license extension beyond the current 90-day window, saying only that conditions must be met before volume increases. Meanwhile, global shipping rates have jumped 14% since early May due to rerouted orders and speculative hoarding of rare earth inventory, according to the Drewry Maritime Index. With no enforcement roadmap and August fast approaching, every handshake is being outpaced by deadlines an industry knows too well. Trump's televised optimism, calling talks productive and rare earth flows restored, stands in sharp contrast to the terms behind closed doors, where Beijing has approved just 5 shipments since May, each under strict scrutiny and tied to specific end-use disclosures. The Wall Street Journal confirms that China's new licensing system evaluates whether U.S. imports serve civilian or military supply chains, with defense-linked contracts facing delays or rejection. Meanwhile, the tentative Geneva Agreement lacks any legal enforcement mechanism, and it expires in 60 days. Both sides have blamed each other for selective implementation. If tariffs snap back, analysts at Oxford Economics forecast a 0.9% GDP hit for the U.S. by year-end, driven by cascading price spikes and stalled output. What Trump calls a deal is structurally an undeclared ceasefire, one Beijing can rescind without warning, and Washington can enforce without consequence. Trump wanted domination, but what he got was dependence, exposed in real time by licensing delays, supply outages, and Beijing's quiet mastery of timing. Rare earths were just the start. Now China is laying the groundwork for an even deeper decoupling, one built on digital currency systems, South-South trade expansion, and raw material alliances outside U.S. reach. While Washington clings to the narrative of a deal, factories, labs, and defense contractors are already scrambling for alternatives that just don't exist. The countdown to August isn't just a trade deadline, it's a test of economic resilience. So if this looked like a reset, watch closely because Beijing hasn't played its final card.